Hey, welcome to this week's episode of The People's Report, News for the Left, brought to you by Solidarity TV. Today is April 8th, 2026. Why are billionaires so desperate to become immigrants? How has federal regulations kept your kids safe this week? With ICE's warehouse plan failing, what can we expect from them next? Why was Mossad protesting in Iran? Why is the US empire trying to destroy quality of life for Iranians? When you're making clones, just how far can you go? How does watching this show put you on an FBI watch list? All these topics and more in tonight's episode of The People's Report. Timestamps and links in the episode description.
Well, don't feel so devastated if you're feeling alienated, because it turns out you're not alone. Just open up your heart, let the revolution start, and grab that megaphone. Solidarity, solidarity, I need you and you need me. Solidarity, 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 solidarity.
American billionaires prepare for Tax the Rich wildfire. March 18, 2026, via The Times. Some of America's wealthiest individuals are starting to worry about pitchforks. Alex Karp, the billionaire chief executive of Palantir Technologies, which builds artificial intelligence-powered data analysis platforms for companies and governments, told a recent Labor AI summit in Washington that the biggest challenge for the AI in the US was political unrest. Or in other words, if the technologists getting wealthier thanks to AI do create tools that lead to swaths of job losses, then the US government's laissez-faire approach to AI regulation and the wealth accumulation of the tech bosses will come under threat from social and political upheaval. Wealth inequality has worsened during President Trump's second administration. The net worth of America's top 1% reached a record share of nearly 32% in the third quarter of 2025, according to the latest data from the Federal Reserve, while the bottom 50% held a 2.5% share of overall net wealth. Even Lloyd Blankfein, the former chief executive of Goldman Sachs, who knows what it's like to see protesters wielding his head on a stick, last week raised the alarm over economic inequality in the U.S. Blankfein, who steered the U.S. investment bank through global financial crisis, told Real Time with Bill Maher on Friday night, "The economic system that we have has done a great job at creating wealth. Now it's created wealth by increasing the value of assets, and so people with assets have gotten a lot richer, but people without assets haven't participated." Sounding more like Zoran Mamdani than a Wall Street grandee, he said a much more progressive tax system was needed, and that more people should be given the necessities of life, such as childcare, healthcare, and other things that rich people can afford, for free. Blankfein recalls his new memoir how the Occupy Wall Street movement that emerged from the global financial crisis was far smaller than media coverage suggested at the time. Occupy Wall Street was undeniably a new kind of protest, without leaders, spokespeople, or a list of demands. He writes it streetwise, getting it and through Goldman Sachs. But it's hardly a mass movement. Social media amplifies the most extreme voices, including the supporters of Luigi Mangione. That doesn't mean the U.S. is about to descend into widespread civil unrest. Matthew Hall, 36, a former restaurant manager who campaigns for Stop AI, a protest group calling for a global ban on the development of AI technology, says the group has only about a dozen very active members in the Bay Area, and about 100 supporters who are less active but involved. He says the group opposes any form of violent protest. "We just are morally opposed to taking action like that," he said, "and it's also not going to accomplish anything. It's going to make it harder for people to listen to the message of AI critics." However, America's billionaires are feeling increasingly uneasy about becoming a political target because their wealth has soared while working Americans continue to face affordability challenges and worries about job losses. The California Billionaire Tax Act, dreamt up by a group of labor unions, is proposing to levy a one-time 5% tax on wealth of about 200 billionaires who were residing in the state on January 1st this year. The act, which needs to garner 875,000 signatures of registered voters in California by June 24th to get on a November ballot during the midterm elections, prompted several billionaires to seek refuge in low-tax states, such as Florida and Texas, before the January deadline. Critics say the proposed act would be particularly punitive for tax entrepreneurs, because it would calculate the 5% tax levy based on a person's voting interest in a company, as opposed to their overall holding. This would penalize tech founders who typically have super voting shares that give them far greater control than their actual ownership stakes. Bernie Sanders, the independent senator for Vermont, has teamed up with Ro Khanna, the Democratic representative, to float a bill that would result in American billionaires paying a 5% annual wealth tax. While the proposal is not likely to be supported by the present Congress, Sanders could be using it as a test for 2028 Democratic presidential candidates. Even as some billionaires are starting to talk about the merits of a more progressive taxation and reforming America's education system to prepare and retrain workers for the AI jobs of the future, others are preparing an escape plan if the country becomes too unfriendly towards the super rich. David Lesperance, a tax and relocation advisor, says American billionaires are increasingly asking him to help them obtain a second passport to dodge a potential tax-the-rich wildfire, which they fear could spread across the country. Popular citizenships under consideration include Spain, New Zealand, Ireland, Portugal, Italy, Greece, Switzerland, Singapore, and, at least prior to the Middle East conflict, Dubai and in the UAE, he said. Lesperance said his 36-year career he had never seen billionaires so interested in fleeing because of tax worries. In California, they were like, "The fire is going to hit us by January 1st, he said. So they left. Yeah, we can do that. But if the Democrats hit the trifecta in November of 2028, you can't be calling me the day after and say, okay, get me out before Inauguration Day. No, that is a much more complicated thing and requires lots of planning. We're getting fire escape plans." Not to be a big downer or the greatest critic of our movement, but it does speak a lot to our movement that the billionaires are scared of liberals implementing taxes, or more scared of liberals implementing taxes than they are of the people that they exploit and rob. Needless to say, all of their wealth comes from exploiting the working class. They get their billions from taking our surplus value. They take the value of our labor that we put into at work gets turned into profits for billionaires and for corporations and shareholders, etc. And then they take all of those profits and give us a smattering of crumbs of it just to sate us enough that we'll show up for work the next morning. People should have, by this time, had enough and done away with that system. Haven't yet. Honestly, we gave it a few decent tries in the past. Maybe we'll be seeing another try eventually. One will hope. But it is a little disappointing to see that these guys are more spooked about liberals like Gavin Newsom, who is a cruel, evil-hearted individual who goes around destroying homeless people's tents and property just in order to spite them. He does so with his bare hands. And this is the kind of person that billionaires are scared of rather than actual decent human beings like you and I. But that aside, the taxes are a good thing. Like, I'm not gonna say that increasing taxes on billionaires is a bad thing. Obviously, I'd prefer something a little bit more kinetic. But we gotta we move slowly. The wheels of history turn slowly, and I'd rather take a little bit now than nothing at all. We made the money. We have a right to it. We should get it. And if the bourgeois liberal governments are going to give us a bit of it, a bit more than we're getting now, great. And the fact that the billionaires are so spooked about this is also just so pathetic on them in the first place. We're talking 5% of billions of dollars. That's, to them, 5% is honestly not a whole lot anyway. You pay, depending where you are, anywhere from 6 to 12%, I think, is the highest on sales tax. Every time you buy anything, paying 5-6 cents on the dollar, if not more. So, if you or I were paying 5% tax, that'd be great. We're not paying a lot higher in our income tax. And so 5% of a billion, while that is a huge chunk of change for a billionaire, it's still 5%. It's 5 cents on a dollar. Honestly, it's less than 5 cents on the dollar if you really think it in terms of actual spending. Because for us, let's say a loaf of bread is, $2 for a decent but still inexpensive loaf of bread? 5% of $2 is 10 cents. If out of those $2 we didn't have that 10 cents, no bread. If you had $1 billion, $2 on bread is nothing. 5 cents out of that $2 is literally nothing. That 5%, while it could help us a lot, is not going to cost them anything. They already have more money than they could ever hope to spend, let alone if they actually tried. So they're trying to leave for red states. Now, in a previous episode, we discussed that in reality, these billionaire flights are incredibly temporary. These guys will leave, I think specifically the article discussed New Jersey. They'll leave New Jersey or California, as in this article, go camp out in Texas or Florida or any of these other red states, and then realize, oh, I actually don't like living here because it sucks. And now if you live in a red state, I'm sure you know all about how it sucks, and you know all about the beautiful things you have. I mean, Texas has wonderful landscapes. Florida has close proximity to Cuba. I don't know, I've never been there. Beautiful beaches and wonderful, the Everglades. It's fantastic. So I don't think that it's just, red states are bad states. But people don't like living in them many people don't like living in them because of the public policy. And billionaires also don't like living in them because of public policy. So we know that they will leave New Jersey or California or any of these other blue states, camp out for a little bit, and then go home. Most of them go back to their blue states that they fled from. Now, these guys are also desperate to just get out of the country and go to tax haven places. Like Ireland is perhaps the most embarrassing one on the list. Obviously, I think we should encourage billionaires to leave the United States and go to the UAE. Iran's shaheds are probably getting pretty hungry right now, and they could use a snack. I think we should feed them. Put them up in those big towers, and then let the shaheds dine. They're cold. If you're cold, they're cold. Let them inside. But the UAE is an evil slave state. It's one of the most disgusting countries on the face of the planet. It should not exist wholesale, much like its cousin Israel. And so it's no wonder that the billionaires want to go there, because it's one of the most decrepit examples of capitalist exploitation of the rich minority absolutely dominating the working majority. And they got literal slaves there. So, and this is the caliber of the people that we're talking about. And their money is our money. We should take it any way we can. I'm glad that some of these guys are a bit spooked about the idea of getting Luigi'd. I shouldn't say that, because Luigi, of course, is innocent. Getting Brian Thompson, maybe. And this is the fear that these guys should have. It's a good, healthy fear for them to have of the working class. And let's hope that they get a little bit more of it. And the resulting fear gives us more of what we deserve before we're ready to go out and take it. If you're enjoying the show, consider supporting us at solidaritytelevision.org. DHS pauses warehouse purchases as internal revolt, legal challenges, and political infighting cloud the program's future. April 1st, 2026 via Project Saltbox. The Department of Homeland Security has temporarily paused its bid to acquire nearly 24 industrial warehouses across the country, the Associated Press reported Tuesday. A move that comes as newly confirmed Secretary Markwayne Mullin inherits the department still reeling from the turbulent tenure of his predecessor, Kristi Noem. As Project Saltbox has previously reported, career officials inside ERO have long viewed the warehouse program as operationally unworkable, and have said so repeatedly to political leadership. Those warnings, according to sources familiar with the internal deliberations, have fallen on deaf ears. The driving rationale from the White House, one source told us in February, has never been operational. It has been theatrical. The source said that Stephen Miller, Trump's deputy chief of staff for policy and his principal Homeland Security advisor, wanted people to suffer, cruelty as the policy. The warehouse purchases, part of what the administration has branded the Detention Re-engineering Initiative, have drawn opposition from communities and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, including in reliably Republican areas where local resistance has stalled the initiative's timeline. One source with direct knowledge of the initiative told me that Noem's departure has reshuffled the internal politics around the warehouses considerably. The Enforcement and Removal Operations arm of ICE, ERO, the agency actually tasked with running the facilities, has grown increasingly resistant to the program. But Stephen Miller is pressing hard to keep it alive. The administration has already spent more than $1 billion on warehouse purchases alone. Up to an additional $900 million is obligated for retrofitting just 2 of the facilities in the coming weeks, according to federal procurement records. One of those projects is now on hold after a district court judge issued and subsequently extended a temporary restraining order in a case brought by the Maryland Attorney General, who alleges the agency failed to follow federal environmental and procedural law in acquiring the site. 2 similar lawsuits in other states make the same allegations. The pause in the internal fighting arrive at a particularly fraught moment. As reported yesterday, a coalition of 47 lawmakers have launched an investigation into the contractors and real estate firms behind the warehouse purchases and conversions. Congress is currently on spring break, a fact that has drawn its own criticism as a partial government shutdown, now in its 48th day, the longest in American history, grinds on, with ICE funding among the unresolved questions at its center. The agency has faced mounting scrutiny over detention conditions and its enforcement operations in cities across the country. The pause in warehouse acquisitions may feel like a victory. It is not, or at least not yet. With 11 properties now in its portfolio and the cost of purchasing, converting, and operating these facilities growing into the billions, the stakes could not be higher. If it weren't for Miller pushing, this would be dead by now, the source told me. A new DHS secretary may not be the obstacle many wish it were. What has changed is the terrain. A record-long shutdown starving the agency of increased funding, lawsuits stacking up in federal courts, a congressional investigation widening, and a department whose own rank and file, by multiple accounts, wants no part of this. The condition for stopping this program may never be better than they are right now. Now could be an appropriate time to give ourselves a little bit of a round of applause or pat ourselves on the back, not because it's over, but because everywhere that these stupid warehouse things have been popping up, the public has come out to protest it. And they haven't just been doing little frog dance protests and the little angry parades that we see at No Kings and 5051 and all the other Democrat stuff. We have people going out into their communities and actively protesting the construction of these warehouses into concentration camps. You have been pushing at city halls, at town halls, at county meetings or parish meetings if you're in Louisiana, and have been out setting these places on fire, creating problems for the landlords that result in them revoking these deals with DHS, and have been pushing lawsuits and other every stop the one can make has started to be made. And that is fantastic. The costs of these warehouses are ballooning. Ridiculously so. One has to speculate as to whether or not these are being purchased at fair market value, or if there's some underhanded swindling going on. Obviously, I'm not going to complain too much about DHS getting fleeced, except for the fact that that is my money that is being now transferred to a private landlord for profit, so that way my government can continue to arrest and detain Hispanic neighbors of mine in concentration camps. That's the big problem. But if the fleecing adds up to one less warehouse being able to be afforded, great. We should put all these warehouses at $1 billion for the DHS and force them to either fork it over or shut down the project. But that's what's happening. The legal challenges are building. The budgets aren't being passed. The costs of construction are increasing. People are being, again, denied warehouses. DHS is being denied access to warehouses because of the risk that demonstrators pose to the property owners. So let that one sink in for a bit. We can all learn some lessons from that. The warehouses, again, I cannot understate that these are concentration camps. That's what they are. They're places for the politically disenfranchised and ethnic perceived ethnic enemies of the state. Obviously, Hispanic people are not, by nature of their ethnicity, enemies of the United States of America. They should be, but not because of their ethnicity. They should be on principle, but they aren't. And they're not being arrested as such. They're being arrested because they are the wrong color, the wrong language, the wrong ethnic group, the wrong nationality. The wrong, of course. And so they're being ethnically persecuted by the state for reasons beyond their control, for immutable characteristics, and they're being concentrated into prison camps for, at best, deportation, at worst, torture, abuse, assault, starvation and thirst, and to the point of death. People have been murdered in these camps. People have been raped in these camps. People have died of thirst in these camps. And then people protesting against immigration enforcement are being shot in the street. So these are part of the state apparatus. And of course, once they run out of either Hispanic people or interest in Hispanic people, who do you think they're going to use or go after in order to keep these camps running? That's what the whole apparatus is designed for the oppression of the American people, or will be more accurate, the oppression of the working class, American or otherwise. They've already been cutting their teeth on oppressing people in foreign countries as well as ethnic minorities here at home. They've already practiced ethnic cleansing campaigns against Native Americans. They've already practiced mass incarceration campaigns against Black Americans. They're now practicing snatch them on the street campaigns with Hispanic Americans. And of course, they're going to be coming after next. All of this is building, well, all of it is already part of, but it's also building towards the open assault on, will be very broad because these people are not very smart or technical like we are, progressive Americans. Going to be going after liberals, progressives, probably not liberals, but maybe liberals. Liberals, progressives, anarchists, communists, socialists of all categories. Not to mention, they're going to be going after trans people, probably gay people, lesbians, bisexual maybe, etc., etc., etc. We'll see. Anyone who is not going to fit their ideal identity or pose a threat through either belief or immutable characteristic to their idealized order. It's the Nazi program all over again, and much to the surprise of very few, American people are not the most upset about this, the Fourth Reich being run out of Washington. A lot of people are, and enough people are, that they are getting stonewalled here, or at least bogged down in the mess with this stupid warehouse nonsense. So keep it up. As the article says, get loud, dig in, really, really, really push back. We all have to do this. We have to get more and more and more people out for this. It has to be expensive for the government. It has to be costly for the landlords. It has to be enough of a problem that they give up. Already, according to the article, a lot of people in DHS think that this is a huge waste of time and money and resources. It's Stephen Miller and his group who are really pushing for this in order to be cruel for cruelty's sake. We need to make them let go before we back down, and we need to do that by pushing hard everywhere we can, as hard as we can, for as long as it takes. So if you've already been involved, get your friends involved. If you haven't been involved, get involved. This is more than just a news report at this point. It's a call to action on this policy as well. You should be doing this for a good deal of what we discuss anyway. Get out there. If the weather is good enough for the mail to be delivered, you should be out there doing whatever you can to end, prevent, stop, delay this program. We've gotten started. And there's no point in backing down at this right now. There's never a point in backing down, but especially right now, we have a really good chance here. Let's not blow it. Solidarity Television is an independent, grassroots news organization. That means we rely exclusively on viewers like you. Support us at solidaritytelevision.org. Israel thought it could spur rebellion inside Iran. That hasn't happened. March 22, 2026, via the New York Times. As the United States and Israel prepared to go to war with Iran, the head of Mossad, Israel's foreign intelligence service, went to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with a plan. Within days of the war's beginning, said David Barnea, the Mossad chief, his service would likely be able to galvanize the Iranian opposition, igniting riots and other acts of rebellion that could even lead to the collapse of Iran's government. Barnea also presented the proposal to the senior Trump administration officials during a visit to Washington in mid-January. Netanyahu adopted the plan. Despite doubts about its viability among senior American officials and some officials in other Israeli intelligence agencies, both he and President Trump seemed to embrace an optimistic outlook. Killing Iran's leaders at the outset of the conflict, followed by a series of intelligence operations intended to encourage regime change, they thought could lead to a mass uprising that might bring about a swift end to the war. 3 weeks into the war, an Iranian uprising has not yet materialized. American and Israeli intelligence assessments have concluded that the theocratic Iranian government is weakened but intact. The belief that Israel and the United States could help instigate widespread revolt was a foundational flaw in the preparations for a war that has spread across the Middle East. Instead of imploding from within, Iran's government has dug in and escalated the conflict, striking blows and counterblows against military bases, cities, and ships around the Persian Gulf, and against vulnerable oil and gas installations. Since Trump's first speech, American officials have largely abandoned speaking publicly about the prospects for a revolt inside of Iran, yet some remain hopeful that one could materialize. Though his rhetoric has become more tempered, Netanyahu says the American and Israeli air campaign will be aided by forces on the ground. Behind the scenes, however, Netanyahu has expressed frustration that Mossad's promises to foment revolt in Iran have not yet materialized. In one security meeting days after the war began, the Prime Minister vented that Trump might decide to end the war any day, and that Mossad's operations had yet to bear fruit. In the run-up to the war, current and former American and Israeli officials said Netanyahu invoked Mossad's optimism about a possibility of an Iranian uprising to help convince Trump that bringing about the collapse of the Iranian government was a realistic goal. Many senior American officials, as well as Amman, viewed the Israeli plan for a mass uprising during the conflict with skepticism. U.S. military leaders told Trump that Iranians would not come out to protest while the United States and Israel were dropping bombs. Intelligence officials had assessed that the possibility of a mass uprising threatening the theocratic government was low, and doubted that the U.S.-Israeli attack would ignite any kind of civil war. Nate Swanson, a former State Department and White House official who was on the Trump administration's Iran negotiating team, led by Steve Witkoff until July, said he had never seen a serious plan to promote an uprising in Iran with the U.S. government in his many years working on Iran policy. American officials briefed on intelligence assessments before the war said the CIA evaluated a variety of possible developments inside Iran once the conflict began. Intelligence agencies considered a full collapse of the Iranian government to be a relatively unlikely outcome. Other U.S. officials familiar with the intelligence said that even when the government is under pressure, as it was during mass protests in the country in January, it managed to quell uprisings relatively quickly. Israeli intelligence agencies have long examined the possibility of instigating revolt inside Iran as its own operation or shortly after the beginning of a military campaign, but until very recently dismissed the prospects. As Israel's main service responsible for foreign operations, Mossad was in charge of the planning. Previously, Mossad's strategy was to weaken the government until it essentially surrendered to Israeli and American demands, using a combination of crippling economic sanctions and operations to assassinate Iranian nuclear scientists and military leaders and sabotage nuclear facilities. In recent months, according to officials, Mossad came to believe that they could potentially begin igniting riots around Iran after several days of intense Israeli and American airstrikes and the assassination of senior Iranian leaders. After the strikes and assassinations of the war's earliest days, the uprising did not come. Don't get it twisted. The New York war crimes is the mouthpiece of empire. It's the mouthpiece of capital. It works to serve the interests of the United States empire. Just because we often perceive it as being a little more liberal than some of its contemporaries does not mean that it's actually opposed to any of the goals or actions of the U.S. empire. We know that the New York war crimes avidly supported in the invasion of Iraq. It passionately supports the genocide of the Palestinians. And in this article itself, actively endorses the attacks on Iran. Now, the article itself might appear at first glance to be relatively, I don't want to say progressive on the issue, but relatively critical of the attacks on Iran. And certainly I assume that because we've got a red president in office being garish and annoying about it instead of being suave and forgettable about it, they are a little bit more opposed. But the New York war crimes, much like the Democrat establishment and the liberals in general, are not opposed to imperialist violence. They are opposed to feeling bad about imperialist violence. And so in this article, one of the things that pops out to me over and over again is that they go out of their way to describe Iran as a regime or as theocratic. And it's not necessarily unfair to criticize Iran's religious policies. And I'm not going to go out of my way to explain why they have those. It's a lesson for a different day. But Israel is fundamentally based on the ideals or the suggested ideals of Judaism. It is a theocratic state. It's not just a theocratic state. It is a theocratic apartheid state. Only people who are part of the supposed religious and ethnic group, the Jews, are allowed to participate in society. Everyone else is permitted to be there only by nature of the fact that there's too many to get rid of at this moment, and they've been slowly pushing everyone else out. So Israel is theocratic. It is built exclusively for one religious group at the expense of all others. But of course, Iran, which has a pretty diverse group of religious peoples in it, even to the point of where many, as the second largest population of Jewish people in the entirety of West Asia, tons of Jewish Iranians serve in the military, serve their government proudly, as do Christians, as do, I presume, Hindus and other religious groups, Zoroastrians. I don't know how many of those people are in Iran today. Zoroastrians, I assume, a good handful. Hindus, I mean, they're a really big religious group, so probably a lot. But I do know specifically that there are plenty of Jews and Christians who are happily part of Iranian society and are pretty much accepted. And so it's just one of the ways that the article is in support of imperialist action. It frames them as being corrupt. It frames Iran as being corrupt, dirty, unlike us, something to be disgusted by, something to be opposed to, even if it doesn't necessarily say bombing and killing these people is good. Another thing is, in the article, it frequently mentions how, or speculates, is more accurate. It speculates and it cites U.S. and Israeli government officials who speculate that the reason that the Iranian people aren't uprising against the government is that they are too scared of the violence that the government will inflict upon them. Which is just not true. The reason that the people aren't revolting against the government is they have no desire to. It's as simple as that. They have no real reason to. We saw some large protests in the country sporadically throughout the last couple of years. We know now by Trump's own admission and Israel's admission in this article, and then of course in the next one we'll be discussing, that the CIA, the United States, the Israel, that Mossad played a huge role in creating these protests and in having them be as deadly as they were. of course, not half as deadly as the Western media pretends it was. We'll see 40, 60, 80,000 people killed in these demonstrations. And across the whole country of about 90 million people, the reality is maybe something closer to 6,000 total. Huge. That's a lot of people. But this is people in general, not protesters. This is people in general. And we know that the United States was shipping weapons to these protesters who are then using them to fire into crowds. We know that it's a bit of uproar about, was he a wrestler? Was arrested and scheduled for execution for protesting, and a bunch of Westerners and as well as, your typical Persian extremists and the Pahlavists were like, oh my goodness, they're going to execute him, why? When the guy was arrested for literally chopping people up with an axe. So these are kind of protests that the United States and Israel were supporting through military means. You can, and I have seen it, I'd advise you go, it's very interesting, find videos of protesters in Iran right now who are in support of the regime. Or demonstrators, I should say, not protesters. You don't protest the government if on the side of the government, obviously. So there are people, even I think I just said regime. That's how media conditioning works. People who support the government, you can find videos of these guys who are saying, yeah, just a few weeks ago or just a few months ago, I was part of these demonstrations, these protests against what the government was doing. But it's more important to be unified as Iran to fight the United States and to fight aggression from the United States and its puppet Israel than it is for me to throw my cards in with the imperialists against my own country. You'll see women who refuse to wear the hijab or any other head covering standing right next to what we like to call the morality police, we being the West, like to call the morality police, and chanting in support of of their own government against American imperialist aggression. And the so-called morality police totally ignore them. These are the same kind of people who not too long ago were saying, hey, we need to remove the hijab requirement. We have to liberalize a bit. We have to offer more things to women, etc., etc. But we should be trusting the approximately 45 million women in Iran to be able to get what they need without the use of U.S. bombs. And one of the things that the U.S. and Israel and Mossad and CIA clearly did not understand was that these are people who actually do care about their country. They're not horribly, terribly oppressed people who are so scared of their country. They're people who have ideological convictions about the state of the world and the role that the U.S. plays in it. They have conviction about who keeps them safe from being exploited by the West. And they know that it is their government, and that their government is them. They are part of it. These aren't two parties, the government on top and the people on the bottom. Iran is democratic. They elected their president. They have probably more democratic than we are, for being honest. They have the ability to pursue their own goals and see those done. The United States has been crushing them with sanctions and blockade and war for decades. This is why they have been in a difficult place. The protests are inorganic. They are not reflective and never were reflective of the will of the people. They were reflective of the will of Israel and the will of the United States that owns and runs Israel. If the Iranian people wanted change, they would make it happen. They don't. And it's not because they're scared. It's not because they're conditioned or brainwashed or some kind of psycho freaks. It is because they know that the only thing that stands between them and being brutalized by the West is Iranian military, the IRGC, the Ayatollah, the government, their brothers and sisters and fathers and mothers and sons and daughters and cousins and everybody else who serves their country and actively participates in its defense. This is why it was always doomed to fail by toppling the government through protests. Inorganic foreign intervention in Iran was never going to work. We kind of knew this. We tried it. It was tried anyway because I guess they thought that it would be nice, but also because Israel, like the United States, is not a society built on anything real. It is built on white supremacy and ethno-nationalism. And so when its foundations are shaken, the people flee because it's not built on anything real. The Palestinians, the Lebanese, the Yemenis, the Iranians, the Iraqis are all people who are built on real civilization. They're built on real life. They have roots that run deep. They're not easily washed away from their land, especially not by foreign agitators who think that they, by divine intervention, are inherently superior to the Persians, to the Yemenis, to the Iranians at large, I should say, the Yemenis, to the Lebanese, to the Iraqis, to the Palestinians. The Iran protests would never topple the government, not because they were incapable of doing so by, nature of fear or by being outnumbered, but because the actual people of Iran support the government to the extent that it exists to protect them from the West, as it has done since 1979. Did you know the People's Report is produced for video and audio platforms? Stay informed by subscribing to us on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts. U.S. and Israel increasingly target Iran's civilian infrastructure. April 5th, 2026, via Le Monde. During his televised address on Wednesday, April 1st, U.S. President Donald Trump vowed to send Iran back to the Stone Ages. The next day, Tehran's Pasteur Institute of Iran, the oldest and most prestigious medical research and public health center across the Middle East, was severely damaged in an airstrike. Neither the United States nor Israel has, at this stage, claimed responsibility for the strike. According to the Iranian government, on March 31st, separate strikes targeted Tawfik Daru, one of Iran's largest pharmaceutical companies, which specializes in the production of anti-cancer drugs and anesthetics. The following day, the Israeli military claimed that the company targeted was one of the main suppliers of fentanyl to the SPND, Iran's nuclear program with possible military dimensions, for use in the research and development of chemical weapons. On April 2nd, the B-1 suspension bridge, which was still under construction to link Tehran to Karaj along the Shalos Road, leading to the Caspian Sea in the north of the country, was bombed twice by U.S. aircraft. According to Iranian media, at least 8 people were killed and nearly 100 injured, including families who had come to picnic under the bridge to mark the end of Nowruz, the Iranian New Year holidays. A few hours later, Trump claimed responsibility for these strikes in his network, Truth Social. The largest bridge in Iran has collapsed and will never be used again. Our military hasn't even started destroying what's left in Iran. Bridges next, then the electrical power plants, he warned, fully conflating the Iranian regime with the population's mean of substance. New regime leadership knows what has to be done and has to be done fast, continued the U.S. president, alluding to what he sees as Tehran's need to surrender by agreeing to loosen its grip on the Strait of Hormuz and halt all uranium enrichment on its soil. The U.S. launched its first strikes against major civilian infrastructure in Iran even before Trump's ultimatum expired on April 6th. The president appeared surprised that Tehran had yet to accept a deal with Washington. "Why wouldn't they call? We just blew up 3 of their big bridges last night," he told Time magazine on April 2nd. The prospect of a deal seems less and less realistic by the day. Meanwhile, Israel struck civilian facilities, including healthcare centers, early in the conflict. However, its operational priority remained weakening the regime and encouraging Iranians to overthrow it after the war. The priority now appears to be shifting towards other objectives, as this war has already lasted longer than most Israeli military experts had imagined. These new goals include the methodical destruction of Iran's military-industrial complex, the need to satisfy Trump by pausing strikes against key regime officials and potential negotiators, and the aim to force Iran into submission through pain, compelling it to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. According to the NGO Human Rights Activists News Agency, the strikes in Iran have resulted in 1,606 civilian deaths, including at least 244 children, and 1,212 military deaths. In addition, 709 more deaths are under investigation to determine whether the victims were civilians or military personnel. The aim is to hasten the collapse of the Iranian state, which is being promised the fate of Syria's Bashar al-Assad's regime, defeated in December of 2024. That would be a slow process for Iran, awaiting the next inevitable air bombing campaign before its regime's eventual fall. This ambition has led Israel to reject any agreement that would mark the end of the war and constrain its future military operations. The targeting of essential civilian structures is fueling growing humanitarian law concerns. On April 2nd, more than 100 American law experts, in an open letter co-signed by leading university professors, expressed profound concern about serious violations of international law and alarming rhetoric coming from Washington. These concerns extended to the health sector. On April 3rd, the Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, condemned multiple attacks on healthcare facilities in Iran since the war began, noting that WHO has verified more than 20 attacks on healthcare in Iran. Founded in 1920, the Pasteur Institute of Iran, which has no direct link to its Parisian namesake, is now out of service following the attacks. The center supplied more than 50% of the country's vaccines, producing over 15 million doses annually, mainly pediatric, tuberculosis, polio, hepatitis, and rabies. By destroying or crippling the Pasteur Institute, it's not just a production capacity that disappears, but the entire microbiological surveillance system, epidemic prevention and emergency health response, warned Iraj Sobhani, professor at the medical faculty of the University Hospital Group Paris-Créteil and Paris-Créteil University. According to Sobhani, if drinking water or sanitation networks were hit, the country would face a major risk of infectious disaster, especially during wartime or other natural disaster. Especially in light of this article and the recent Trump outbursts of how he's going to destroy this civilization in a matter of hours, and all the other nonsense he's been saying. We're going to bomb bridges, we're going to bomb power plants, we're going to blast these people to the Stone Age. Is it any wonder that the Iranian people would support the institutions that are fighting to resist Trump and the United States at large? They're bombing hospitals, or they've bombed schools, they've bombed bridges, they've bombed power plants, they've bombed pharmaceutical factories, they've bombed residential neighborhoods. I want to say up into the thousands of residential buildings they've bombed. So in the face of aggression like this, unchecked aggression, violent racial aggression, of course the Iranian people are going to take a look at that and say, well, I'm going to go with the guys in Tehran. Maybe I'm not the biggest fan, but they didn't blow up my house, they didn't blow up my school, they didn't blow up my kids, they didn't blow up my bridge, they didn't blow up my power plants, they didn't blow up the medicine that I was going to give my kids. And it's important to note that this is not particularly new for the United States. That Donald Trump is not an aberration here. The surprise of Donald Trump is that he is being open about his role in imperialism, which isn't something we've had in a very long time. We've had presidents sanction Iran, bomb Iran, invade Iran. We've had presidents support attacks on Iran and other peoples in the Middle East. We've had presidents obliterate Libya. We've had presidents topple Syria. We've had presidents invade Iraq and occupy it for 23 years. We've had presidents invade Afghanistan and occupy it for 20 years. We've had presidents mindlessly shell Lebanon. We've had presidents support the genocide of the Palestinians very materially. We've had presidents invade Korea and invade Vietnam in order to destroy the will of the people there through mass genocide campaigns. This is not new. Trump's bombings of Iran are not particularly new. Bill Clinton blew up a pharmaceutical plant in Sudan back in the 90s. He bombed and invaded Somalia back in the 90s, Yugoslavia. We've had Obama, who was the architect, maybe not the architect, but the executor of the destruction of Libya and the removal of a government that, although it had questionable activities at times, generally had the popular support of the people up until the United States destroyed it. And now it has open air slave markets. That was under Obama. ISIS was under Obama and the start of the American intervention into Syria in order to destroy the Syrian people. And I don't even need to say anything about what Biden was up to. So it's not just Republicans. It's not just the Trump cabal. It's not just these guys in the White House right now. It's about the entire U.S. imperial project. It's about Puerto Rico. It's about Hawaii. It's about Guam. It's about the Philippines. It's about Israel, which is a U.S. colony in the Middle East. So, again, it's no wonder that the Iranian people are not too interested in overthrowing the government on behalf of the United States and Israel. It's not going to work out for them. Look how it turned out for Syria, or Iraq, or Afghanistan, or Libya. And of course, this is also their plan in Lebanon. Let's not forget that Lebanon is having an immense crisis right now, and they are putting themselves on the line every single day in support of the Axis of Resistance, the Palestinians, and in the fight against the American empire. An often unsung hero in this story. So good for them. And this is the kind of destruction that the U.S. is going to wreak on people who oppose them. And it's not just about blatant imperialism and power and hegemony. It's capital in general. Imperialism is, of course, the highest stage of capital. We know this. When all of the untouched markets have been touched, then they have to jockey for power over the cornered markets. And we can see that so plainly in Iran right now, where some of the first places the United States hit were pistachio farms and storage and processing facilities. Why? Because the wonderful company based out of California, who have the huge pistachio market cornered in the United States, has been sponsoring and paying for Congress and politicians to encourage the destruction of Iran in order to maintain their power and control over pistachios on the global market. I wish I were making this up. It is literally that stupid. The United States bombed pistachio plants in Iran to support pistachio farm owners in America. It is almost comical in how blatant it is. But of course, that's what this has been about in the first place. Cornering and owning markets and labor in Iran and preserving the hegemony of the U.S. empire and its expansion across Asia, and to stop resistance to American empire. So this is why they're going around bombing infrastructure. They don't want to just topple the Iranian government, even though sometimes we pretend that that's the case. They want to destroy the people. They want to exploit them for all that they're worth. They want to remove them as a challenger for markets. They want to be able to exploit the labor of Iran and sell them goods, or introduce those goods onto the global market in order to boost trade and share and stock value. They want to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, not because our oil consumption is getting choked out, but because they want to control the flow of oil and for the health and safety of the petrodollar. And Iran is threatening to change the way that oil economy works, because right now it's in favor of the United States. Iran's being a real bro to Oman right now, by the way. That's pretty cool. This is what it's about. This is why they're destroying pharmaceutical companies. It's not because they want to free the Iranian people. And if you're watching, especially if you made it this far, you already know that that's not the case. They have no interest in helping the Iranian people. But some people, especially some liberals, seem to think that that has to happen. The Iranian people are never going to be liberated by blowing up their infectious disease laboratories or the factories that make the vaccines to keep their kids from getting sick at school. It is about torturing the Iranian people and inflicting so much pain upon the people that they give up, and that their government is no longer has the political will or the physical ability to resist U.S. hegemony. It's exactly what they're trying to do with Cuba right now. It's what they've done in other places that have resisted U.S. control. Our goal here in the United States or in your country is to reel in or throw out the U.S. empire and stop it from being able to commit these acts of terror against the general public. The general public of the world is not American. Most people in the world are not American. Most people in the world, even some other Westerners, I don't want to say live at the mercy of, but live with the United States pointing a gun at their house at all hours of the day. Removing that gun is very important for the rest of the world to be able to live happy, safe, and healthy lives. Otherwise, the United States is going to blow up their schools, blow up their bridges, blow up their New Year's festivals, blow up their streets, their water, etc. Anything they can do to destroy the will of the people to pursue their own sovereignty and their own self-determination against the wishes of the American empire. Hey, if you like the People's Report, check out our other shows at solidaritytv.org. Health alert over dinosaur chicken nuggets sold at Walmart has been retracted after additional testing. April 7, 2026, via Today. Public health officials have retracted their warning to consumers about a popular variety of dinosaur chicken nuggets, which had said the product may have been contaminated with unsafe levels of lead. On April 6th, 5 days after the original warning was issued, the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food Safety and Inspection Service said in a statement that the product no longer posed a public health concern. The public health alert was originally issued based on routine surveillance sampling conducted by the New York State Department of Public Health that indicated elevated trace levels of lead. Because this product is commonly consumed by children, FSIS issued the alert to inform consumers of a potential risk, the statement read. Following the alert, additional sampling was conducted by the New York State Department of Public Health and the producing establishment, Dorada Foods. As part of that process, the original lot of product was tested, as well as additional lots. All follow-up testing, including testing of the original lot, found no elevated levels of lead in the product. FSIS subsequently reviewed the underlying laboratory data in coordination with the New York State Department of Health and determined that the initial result was a false positive, caused by sporadic lead contamination at the laboratory during analysis and not contamination of the product itself. Follow-up testing confirmed no elevated levels of lead were present in any of the products tested. The frozen nuggets in question were sold at Walmart nationwide under the Great Value brand name. They are manufactured by Dorada Foods. Health and safety are always a top priority. As soon as we were alerted to the issue, we moved quickly to issue a sales restriction and remove the product from sale in stores and online, Walmart spokesperson told Today.com in a statement. The statement continued, "We're working with the supplier to investigate. Customers who purchase the impacted items can return to any Walmart for a refund." Dino nuggets are safe. It's always a blessing. Especially because, of course, kids eat it, but, if you're going to eat a chicken nugget, it's already mashed up chicken. Might as well have it in a fun shape rather than the generic shapes. I don't know. I don't eat dino nuggets, but I would if I ate chicken nuggets. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe they're not even good. I digress. That's not important. The important part is that this is why we have FDA regulations. Now, we've had a number of stories in the past, and if you haven't seen it in our videos, you've definitely seen it just on the news, of outbreaks of disease, contamination, and such in food products. From listeria on lettuce, if I recall, to metal or plastic fragments in cheese, to, all kinds of different things, contaminations, just food just not being safe and being shipped out, especially more and more frequently in the wake of cuts to federal health and human services and FDA, etc. When we stop valuing the people enough to a point where we stop valuing their health, we're going to cut corners and result in sick, unhealthy, unwell people as a result of contaminated, toxic, spoiled, dangerous foodstuffs. And now this is a false positive, but they checked the nuggets in a routine inspection. They found traces of lead. They shut down production. They recalled the items, and they were able to conduct enough tests where they were able to determine that it was, in fact, healthy and safe. This is why we have a federal government. This is why we have these things in place. It's good to have people who are going to go and check our food. It's good to make sure that people are having healthy food. It is bad to ingest chicken nuggets contaminated with lead, even if it might taste a little sweeter. That's an eating lead joke. If you didn't know, lead makes things taste sweeter. Don't eat lead. It's bad to have children eating lead. It's bad to have anybody eating plastic or metal fragments in their cheese. It's bad to have listeria outbreaks and E. coli because people ate contaminated food. Obviously, you guys know that. I didn't have to tell it to you. And it's good to have a system in place that prevents that from happening, or that can immediately, rapidly respond to it, so that way only a few people get sick, because mistakes happen, and they shouldn't, but sometimes they do. And it's better to have, an outbreak, a contamination, get immediately stopped by government oversight than it is for it to not get checked. And we all know that the capitalists don't care about our quality of health, except to the extent that we are still able to pay into their system in order to give them all our money. If they can't use us for work, and they can't extract wealth from us through, punitive health insurance schemes or other such policies, then we're worthless to them. But we don't have to be well to be a good worker, necessarily. You don't have to be well in order to pay insurance premiums. So the capitalist interest in our health is very marginal. This is why back around the turn of last century, we had big problems with food contamination, with capitalists increasing profits by cutting quality on food. If milk costs $3 to make, it costs $3 a gallon to make, and you sell it for $4, well, if you cut it with water, maybe it costs only $2 to make, and then you sell it for $4. Now you get a full extra dollar of profit, just as a random example. I distinctly remember them putting, I think it was sawdust in flour maybe, and sand in salt and sugar. So you're buying more product, you're paying for more product and receiving less, and thus the capitalists pocket the difference. That's what the FDA was designed to prevent. Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. It's about the meatpacking industry and working conditions and whatnot. It's the food could have been and traditionally was significantly worse. We still have problems with our food just not being as high quality as it is in other places of the world because of the push for capitalist profits through food. So it's good to have these checks to make sure that our food is safe, it is healthy, and especially if children are going to be eating it. Not that adults should eat plastic shards or get listeria or E. coli, but kids definitely shouldn't either. And if it's going to be food marketed towards children, we want to definitely make sure that it's safe, especially when it comes to something like lead, which stays in the body forever. The cumulative effects of lead over a long period of time are or can be very debilitating. And a little bit of lead in a full-grown person is going to be significantly, and healthier is the wrong term. It's not going to be as bad as it would be the same amount of lead in a significantly smaller person. So we need to have these checks. We need to make sure that our people are safe and healthy. That's what we want. We want a good, safe, healthy community. We want neighbors who are safe and healthy. We want to be safe and healthy for ourselves, our friends, families, or loved ones. Even the most annoying people on your block should be, at the very least, safe and healthy. It's what society is all about. And the capitalists are never going to deliver safety, and they're never going to deliver health as long as they can create profit on your unsafety and your unhealth. This week's book recommendation is Black Marxism by Cedric Robinson. This book is a detailed study of the exploitation of Black people throughout history and the emergence of racial capitalism, resulting in the Black radical tradition. Can you clone a clone forever? Landmark 20-year study reveals horrifying verdict. March 26, 2026, via The Independent. A 2-decade study into cloning has revealed a fundamental flaw in the technology, demonstrating that repeated duplication leads to an accumulation of fatal genetic mutations. Researchers in Japan generated 1,206 cloned laboratory mice from a single female donor between 2005 and 2025. Initially, no outward signs of trouble were observed across the first 25 generations. However, genetic mutations subsequently began to pile up, ultimately proving fatal. The 58th generation of clones, despite appearing physically normal, died within days of birth due to these accumulated genetic mutations. The extensive research directly contradicts the long-held notion that clones are identical copies of their original donor, and disproves the idea that current cloning technology could be sustained indefinitely without adverse effects. Developmental biologist Teriko Wakayama of the University of Yamanashi, senior author of the research published on Tuesday in the Journal of Nature Communications, stated, "No one has ever continued recloning for this long before. As a result, this is the first time we've discovered that repeated recloning eventually reaches its limits. It was once believed that clones were identical to the original, but it has become clear through this study that mutations occur at a rate 3 times higher than in offspring born through natural mating," Wakayama said. After generating the first clone, the researchers repeated the process every 3 to 4 months, cloning each generation from the one preceding it. Like the original donor mouse, all the clones were females with brown fur. The researchers published preliminary results in 2013 spanning the first 25 generations that found the clones to be healthy, with no apparent negative effects. At that time, we concluded that recloning could likely continue indefinitely. However, in that study, we did not examine the genetic sequences. We continued our research for 13 more years, and as a result, we discovered that our previous conclusion was incorrect. That is, there is a limit to recloning, Wakayama said. The researchers sequenced the genomes of 10 clones from the various generations to understand what was happening at the genetic level. They found that serial cloning produced an effect akin to duplicating a picture using a copying machine. With the first copy, the image quality deteriorates slightly. When copying that copied image, the quality deteriorates further. Repeating the process numerous times yields an image very different from the original. The study results, they said, pointed to the importance of sexual reproduction in countering deleterious genetic mutations in mammals. The researchers gauged the fertility of the clones by mating them with ordinary male mice. Up to the 20th generation, they gave birth to about 10 babies per litter, just like ordinary female mice. But eventually, the clones began having smaller litters, reflecting the effects of accumulating mutations. The researchers used a technique called nuclear transfer to generate the clones. The same method was used to produce Dolly the sheep, the first successfully cloned mammal, at a laboratory in Scotland in 1996, and Cumulina, the first successfully cloned lab mouse, at a lab in Hawaii in 1998. With nuclear transfer technology, researchers create an embryo by transferring the nucleus, cell's primary repository of genetic information, from a donor cell into an egg cell whose own nucleus was removed. A specialized ovarian cell, called a cumulus cell, that surrounds and nurtures a developing egg was used in cloning. An increase in large-scale harmful mutations began with the 27th generation, including chromosomal abnormalities. In cloning, all genes are passed on to the next generation, meaning that all defective genes are also passed on, Wakayama said. This is a bit more of a fun article, I guess. It's not really that fun, especially when it deals with what could reasonably be considered animal abuse. But it's a fun kind of article because it gives us the opportunity to think ahead rather than to look back. And what are the implications of cloning? What would be done with cloning? What could be done with cloning versus what can we reasonably expect to be done with cloning? And as a guy who grew up with Star Wars, the Attack of the Clones came out when I was young. Clone Wars were airing when I was older but still young. The idea to me when I think of what's the potential with human cloning is clone armies. The people will be, I'll say the U.S. will presume that the United States will still be around. It's not going to be. We'll presume the United States is still going to be around when human cloning is successful. And they'll find the genetically perfect or genetically as close as possible to perfect soldier and just breed a whole ton of them. Or workers and just breed a whole ton of them and use them for fighting wars, for doing manual labor, for doing things that, right now maybe would be cheaper if you didn't have to pay the employees to do the work. If you could own the employees as a person or as property without the worry about them being considered legally a person. And of course, again, this is why it's a bit more fun because we can speculate. Will that happen? Who knows? It beats me. Hopefully not. But it brings into questions of personhood, of what personhood looks like under capital anyway, when the capitalists can breed people. And we already know what happens when the capitalists can create new laborers through breeding programs. I'll give you an opportunity to think about that on your own when I tell you these two facts. Number one, slavery in the United States was prohibited mostly in 1865. Number two, the importation of people as slaves was prohibited in 1808. Let that sit for a minute. So if we had the opportunity to create people, what would be done with it? And this is one of the reasons why it's so important for us to prepare for the eventual evolution of our society into a socialist and into a communist society. Because a government that works for the people, a system, a society that's designed for the people rather than for capital, would never allow such terrible things to occur, because it is the people themselves who are running the place rather than being subjected to the place. What other things could be done with cloning? Probably the establishment of factory farms or factory breeding of animals for meat. Hopefully, now 3D printing meat has been on the up and coming. Hopefully that turns out great and we get it more widespread. It'd be wonderful to be able to just artificially create meat rather than the way we're doing it now. But, people are already opposed to it. And yeah, I get it. It's kind of gross to think about 3D printing meat, or just seeing the videos of the sludge coming out in the little meat shape. Yeah, it's kind of gross. But you ever seen how a hot dog is made? That's pretty gross too. So, you win some, you lose some. Oatmeal isn't exactly that appealing in the bowl either, So but it's still delicious and it's still perfectly healthy for you. I digress. In lieu of that, we've got the potential for just mass producing animals based on, what the genetic models that we can make of the idealized food animal. We've already done this with selective breeding. Our chickens have been getting fatter, probably pigs too, cows, etc. I just distinctly remember, you've probably seen it, the image of the chicken, how the average chicken looked in 1950 versus in 2015. Just so radically different through selective breeding in order to create more food appealing animals. And then if we get ones, perfect or really good, we can just, again, theoretically, then hopefully not, just keep making copies of it. And of course, we can't exactly expect them to keep making copies of the original all the time. And this is why it's important for us to have an understanding of how far we can go with cloning. Or at least a potential aspect of why it could be important. Maybe cloning will never take off. Maybe it'll just be one of those genetic oddities or scientific oddities that we can do. Kind of like going to Mars. Obviously, humans are never going to be going to Mars. We'll never be colonizing the moon kind of thing. But being able to land on the moon is pretty cool. And hopefully we'll never be cloning people as part of daily life or animals. Already, cloning the animals to the point of genetic aberration and genetic failure to the point where they're just dying almost instantly after being born is cruel. And so hopefully we're never getting to that point on a massive scale. But being able to clone an animal is really cool. Being able to clone a person could be really cool from a purely strictly scientific standpoint. And if we want to have access to the cool parts of science rather than the dystopian parts of science, society has to be around or has to be organized in such a way that it benefits the people. So that way stuff that gets invented can be used to be helpful and cool rather than terrible and punitive. It's the same thing with AI or with automation. Automation is cool. AI could be cool. I'm a big AI downer, but it could be cool if it alleviates work from the people and gives us more opportunities to have leisure. Instead, what we've got, because we have our capitalist system, is automation throws people out onto the street. AI destroys creative input. And it's similar to not the industrial, but the houseware revolution of like the 50s. Once we got sewing machines and electric mixers and vacuum cleaners and that kind of thing, washing machines, I don't know if I said that one, dryers in houses, suddenly the amount of labor that a woman could do in the house exploded. The amount that she could do every single day exploded. So rather than, the washing machine takes laundry, it used to take a full day, and now you can do it passively in 2 hours. An hour for washing, an hour for drying. Now suddenly the entire chore of your entire day is just 2 hours of work. Well, the rest of those hours had to be filled with other work, rather than her just being able to go. And I say her because traditionally in the time period in which this happened, women were largely excluded from other parts of society. So now, rather than just being able to hang around and do leisure activities for the rest of the day, she was forced into doing more labor. Well, if you now have 6 hours off, go do more work. This is why we need to have a society built for people. If your job could be done by a robot at the car factory, you should be able to just blow all that time off and have it your own. If I don't really know where cloning would fit into this, I personally have difficulty conceiving of a practical or pro-social benefit of cloning. Maybe, I don't know. I'd even say maybe in the case of family death, but I don't know, it still seems exploitative of the clone itself, forcing it to adopt another person's identity. But, I don't know, maybe you can come up with something a little more pro-social and more creative than I can off the spur of the moment. Let us know. We all know what Israel would do with the clones is they're already stealing genetic material from dead bodies in order to create more Israelis. God forbid they ever get cloning technology. We'd have the worst people running around in doubled. So, yeah, that would suck. As the weather changes for the better, let's remember the words of Chairman Mao: civilize the mind and make savage the body. In order to outperform ice, we must first match their physical fitness standards. If it makes sense for you, focus on cardio this week to build endurance so we can complete a 1.5-mile run, or 2.4 kilometers, in 14 minutes and 25 seconds or less. FBI's new Political Pre-Crime Center, April 5, 2026, via Ken Klippenstein. President Trump's budget request to Congress contains the largest counterterrorism spending increase in years, and buried inside it is a new FBI-led center dedicated to proactively hunting Americans the government classifies as so-called domestic terrorists. The new center and funding boost represent the implementation of Trump's National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, NSPM 7, the sweeping federal order Klippenstein has been covering since it was signed last September. Though public opposition to ICE succeeded at forcing the administration to back down in Minnesota, even firing both Kristi Noem and Gregory Bovino, the FBI is doubling down its domestic terrorism obsession. Now, Trump's budget request reveals the FBI runs a dedicated NSPM 7 Joint Mission Center with personnel from 10 federal agencies. It is busy proactively identifying domestic terrorists motivated by any of the following beliefs: anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, support for the overthrow of the U.S. government, extremism on migration, extremism on race, extremism on gender, hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on family, hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on religion, and hostility towards those who hold traditional views on morality. In other words, if your political views are practically anything other than MAGA, you're on notice, courtesy of the FBI. The new center combats these supposed threats by integrating intelligence, operational support, and financial analysis, the budget request says. Its creation appears to be inspired by the murder of conservative commentator Charlie Kirk, an event that reportedly precipitated the formulation of NSPM 7 in the first place, according to the budget request, which alludes to heinous assassinations having dramatically increased. The budget request also singles out social media as some kind of breeding ground for domestic terrorism, saying, domestic terrorists exploit a variety of popular social media platforms, smaller websites with targeted audiences, and encrypted chat applications. They use these platforms to recruit new adherents, plan and rally support for in-person actions, and disseminate materials encouraging radicalization and mobilization to violence. It's hard to overstate how much the FBI is focusing on domestic terrorism under Patel and the Trump administration. Yet the media have barely covered NSPM 7, let alone the FBI shift. Shortly after Kirk's death, FBI Director Kash Patel testified to Congress that he was overseeing a 300% increase in domestic terrorism investigations, and in the first month of the administration, the FBI replaced the 9/11-inspired Terrorist Screening Center with the Threat Screening Center. As reported at the time, the new mission broadened the scope to include all national security threats, which ostensibly was expanded to accommodate increased focus on transnational criminal organizations. Now the Threat Screening Center oversees multiple terrorist watch lists that separate international terrorists, transnational criminals, and purely domestic threats. Then there's the fact that the FBI's domestic terrorism watch list is growing, as reported last year. Again, all of these developments have yielded virtually zero media attention. The public might have won the Battle of Minneapolis, but the White House hasn't given up on its domestic terrorism fixation, even after virtually every official has walked back claims that Renee Good and Alex Preddy were domestic terrorists. This is one that you and your friends should probably be a little spooked about, if you live in the United States. Otherwise, pity us, I guess. 'Cause this is, and don't come here. Obviously, I'm a big fan of foreigners entering the country, but I don't know, maybe it's not a good idea, because this place sucks. Anyway, reiterating some of these conditions that are considered to be, now we remember from the first time that the news came out, these were considered to be conditions that, or activities, thought patterns that could, it's why the article is titled Pre-Crime, because these are beliefs, attitudes, political positions, communications that could indicate that one was at risk of becoming a nihilistic, violent extremist, if my memory serves me correctly. And so this is the FBI keeping tabs on people who espouse these beliefs, under the pretext that they could or were more likely to become domestic terrorists. Let me again read these out to you. Anti-Americanism. Now, what is Americanism? What is a pro-Americanist idea? Is loving my people, hating my government, pro or anti-American? Is wanting to see Black Americans be given all the same opportunities as white Americans? Is that pro-America or is that anti-America? Now, I have pretty broadly anti-American beliefs. Like, it's, for that one, there are some pretty clear ones. Anti-capitalism. I mean, that's pretty much targeting us, targeting people on the left, and which is why, again, I'll reiterate, wear your get-along shirt. Come on. Anarchists and communists and socialists, all the other ists on the left have to stop bickering. I know most of the leftist infighting is kind of just made up, or it's weird Twitterites who don't actually talk to other human beings except for their mom when they're yelling at them to get the not lead-infected dino nuggets. So if you spend all your time arguing on Twitter, get a job. But, you know, we still do have disagreements on the left between, like, anarchists and capitalists. Yeah, great. Anarchists should fight the capitalists. Anarchists and the communists. But, again, as Ben Franklin said, and I don't like to quote America's founding father so much, but this is a pretty good one. We all have to hang together, or most assuredly, we will hang separately. That's big takeaway here. If nothing else, take away that the anarchists, the Marxists, the Trotskyists, Stalinists, I don't know, whatever, the tankies, if you call them, whatever type of left-winger you are, all of these guys are in the same boat. They can be really annoying. They can be way off the walls. They might be seriously undereducated or miseducated or whatever. But they're going after all the anti-capitalists, all the so-called anti-Americanists, all the anti-Christianity guys. That's all of us, bud. Sorry, I don't care if you think anarchists are annoying. I don't care if you think Marxists are too authoritarian. Get over it. The day that matters is going to be the greatest day of our lives. It's the day that we win. And we're not even close. So, shut up. Get over it. I digress. I'm guilty of that too, by the way. I complain a little too much about my allies. Anti-Christianity. What does that mean? Does that mean being opposed to Christianity, or does that mean not being Christian? Are Muslims inherently anti-Christianity? Are Jews inherently anti-Christianity? Jewish people do not like, theologically speaking, obviously people kind of don't care about other people's religion all that much as they pretend to. Theologically, Jewish people are not big fans of Christians. You can't blame them either. Look what the Christians did to them. But, you know, so is then being Jewish target you as potentially being a domestic terrorist? We already know being Muslim does. Being Hindu is being atheist. Support for the overthrow of the U.S. government. That one, I don't agree. I get it. Okay. Yeah, if you support the overthrow of the U.S. government, I can understand why you might be on, or might be considered to be potentially a sympathizer for domestic terrorism. Obviously, they're never going to go after the Chuds for this. I mean, that's kind of what January 6th was, but I digress. I get it. Intellectually, I understand that one. Extremism on migration. What does that mean? Because to me, ICE is extremist on migration. Is extremism on migration being too pro-immigrant or too anti-immigrant? Extremism on race. White supremacists, I think, are extremist on race, but is being a black nationalist going to be considered being extremist on race, but not white nationalist? Obviously, those two people are not the same. Black nationalists are not the same as white nationalists. It's just two very different meaning terms. They're not the same. Your average black nationalist is not a blow up Oklahoma City type of guy. It's even at our most hateful. It's like women who hate men. They don't kill them. Men who hate women kill them all the fucking time. So do not ever get confused between black nationalists and white nationalists. White nationalists are evil, hateful, violent people. Black nationalists are not. Maybe they should be, but they're not. Extremism on gender. What is extremism on gender? That one, I mean, I know what they mean by this, but what is extremism on gender? Is it enforcing gender roles? Or is it saying trans people aren't the worst to ever happen to society? Hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on family. Are we kidding me? Are you kidding me? Hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on religion. Is that Catholics? What about Catholics? Are Catholics don't hold traditional American views on religion because they're Catholic and not Protestant. What about Mormons? Maybe this will go after Mormons. That'd be cool. Again, what about Jewish people? What about Muslims? Is traditional American views on religion, is that being pro-religion? Is that being Protestant? Is that being tolerant of religion as described in the Constitution? Hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on morality. Literally, what does that mean? We don't have morality in this country. This is the United States of America. It's not founded on morality. Morality has nothing to do with this. And the reason why I ask all these as speculation questions, we all know what it means. Obviously, the article immediately says afterwards, MAGA. Yeah, we know what this actually means. But my point is to point out that all of these are so, most of these, all except for one of these, is so generic or so broad that anyone can get swept up in it at their whim. And we all know who will, and we all know who won't. The Klan isn't going to get caught up in this, even though they have extremist views on migration, race, religion, gender. So if you think that this isn't going to apply to you, if you think this isn't going to apply to your friends, maybe it won't today, maybe it won't next year, maybe it won't in 3 years. But eventually it might if you pose a threat to, an ideological threat to the MAGA movement. Then they'll wrap it up. And this is also a great opportunity to go out and reach those liberals. Because as much as I really don't want to, and you probably don't want to either, the average liberal probably has relatively progressive views on religion, at least in terms of Americans. They probably have some progressive views on gender, on race, on migration. And that means that they could possibly be wrapped up in this one day. So it's a great opportunity to say, hey, guys, make sure you're actually doing things. And I don't know. And this also, on the budget request, it's another great way to reach people who might otherwise not be all that invested. As it says, singles out social media as some kind of breeding ground for domestic terrorism. The exact quote from the budget request: domestic terrorists exploit a variety of popular social media platforms. None of us use popular social media platforms. Your average person on the street definitely doesn't use popular social media platforms. Smaller websites with targeted audiences, and encrypted chat applications. So being on social media, being on smaller social media, and using encrypted chat, like I think Facebook Messenger is an encrypted chat. I'm not 100% sure. WhatsApp is. I think these are kind of like really cheap, like the worst encrypted chats you can get. I'm not 100% sure if they are. Having encrypted chats puts you on or means that you could be watched. Are you kidding me? Everybody does that all the time because they want to dodge ads at the very least. You're not out here, they're using these platforms to recruit new adherents, plan and rally support for in-person actions, and disseminate materials encouraging radicalization and mobilization to violence. First of all, that's exactly what MAGA does. I digress. That's not the point. Obviously, we all know that these guys are hypocrites and that they're going to be as broad as possible to hit every single enemy that they can. But this is going to sweep up some of our friends who are not as engaged as we are. Smaller websites with targeted audiences could very well include Discord. We know from this article that the FBI was investigating people in Discord and going through every single one of them for the person in relation to the person they accuse of shooting Charlie Kirk. So, this is what all these investigations are about. They're going to try, and they already are, of course, trying to track, surveil, and silence or suppress anyone that they feel has views that could potentially threaten or question the views of the Fourth Reich, the United States of America, the Nazi American terror organization. And so they're going to go after anyone that they can get away with. So that's us. That's you for watching this show. Let's see, on this show already, we have espoused anti-American views, anti-capitalist views, probably anti-Christian views, support for the overthrow of the U.S. government. I think technically we've done that. Extremism on migration, arguably. Extremism on race, arguably. On gender, arguably. Hostile towards traditional American views on family, probably not. Maybe not that one. Traditional views on religion, yeah. Hostile towards traditional views on morality, absolutely. So, great. I'm not worried. You honestly should be concerned, but not scared, right? Because that's the whole point. And the reason why I'm spending so much time discussing this is to point out, first, the lengths that they're willing to go to get us all in the dragnet. And the realistic, maybe not capability, but the realistic worry that they will try to pick us up or monitor us, stalk us, whatever the government does. They have traffic cams they have spy cams in the traffic cones, right? Like, this is literally happening. They're tracking people around. And the reason why they want us to know about this rather than just doing it in secret is, they need to get the budget, so it has to be public to some extent, but they want us to be scared. They want us to be reluctant to get engaged. They want us to not go out and demonstrate in front of ICE warehouses. They want us to not resist. They want us to be too scared to do anything. Because if we're too scared to do anything and nothing gets done and they just have a really easy march along, we need to be roadblocks. We need to stop the fascist tide before it gets to be high tide. We need to do it by any means possible, any means necessary. And we need to be willing to do so. The machine is killing people, and we can't just sit around and wait for it to come to us, and we can't just lament the fact that it's killing people nonstop. We have to go out there and stop it. If that means throwing our literal bodies into the machine to get ground up in the hopes that our bodies will gum up the gears and make it stop, even if it means that we only get to slow it down. Can't be scared of this. We have to have some form of revolutionary optimism. We have to acknowledge that it is inevitable that we are going to win. And in fact, it is so inevitable that when it happens, we're going to look back and laugh at the fact that we ever even doubted whether or not it was possible. It's inevitable. We will win. They cannot win. They can do a lot, and they have done a lot. But look what Israel's done to the Palestinians. They haven't even come close to winning. It's not over yet. It's not over for us. And this little FBI watch list thing is going to encompass way too many people to actually be workable. It's there to scare us. It's there to hurt us. But there's more of us than they can hurt. Another way you can support us is by following us on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Hey, thanks for joining us for this week's episode of The People's Report. Don't forget to subscribe at solidaritytelevision.org. Organizing the working classes of the world in solidarity forever.